So how's everybody doing today? We are currently working with a couple technical difficulties. So give me a few moments while I bust on through these issues. Uh, had a great opportunity today. We're spending some time with the daughter, and that lost a little bit of time in the process. So here we are playing catch up on the technical side of things. Um, and it does not want to let me do some of these things that I want to do. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get on into the things I wanted to talk about today. So if we take a look at what we got, first is the M.O.R.E Act. What's going on with federal marijuana legalization in the United States? Now, this has been a problem because it's been a long going thing. M.O.R.E Act has been working on marijuana legislation at the federal level for going on 3-4 years now. And the entire idea is that they're trying to legalize the entire process, deschedule marijuana, and effectively regulate it in either some sort of combination medicine slash tobacco type of regulation, which they can control who has access and under what conditions. Now, this keeps going back and forth. The reason why is because it doesn't quite have 100% support in the Democrats, and the Republicans are always coming back with certain issues with regards to it. And it still doesn't solve certain other problems with regards to delegislation. Reason why is because the Banking Act, there's some sister legislation that needs to occur alongside the M.O.R.E Act if we honestly expect to see success with regards to what is going on. You got storms coming in your area, don't you, Dolores? So with regards to the M.O.R.E Act, oh, let's go ahead and do this because I want to make sure that I'm doing this right. The M.O.R.E Act, like I said, a couple of years and the sister legislation that needs to go through it in order to get it federally legalized. Now, we continue to see back and forth with regards to the M.O.R.E Act. The M.O.R.E Act, yes. With regards to some of the things that's going on with that. It's a problem. It's a huge problem because the states, we've had states that have had legal marijuana at the state level. Each of the states have come up with their own way of handling and processing things, which means when we come in with the M.O.R.E Act and say, no, we need you to do it differently, there's an awful lot of state systems that are going to come in and go, you know what? Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll just go ahead and keep doing what we're doing. So there's the debate as to whether or not the old state processes will be grandfathered in and allowed to continue to exist, or whether or not there's other things that are going to be problematic with regards to the whole process. In addition to that, yes, Kay, absolutely. This is one of those things that we talk about on a fairly regular basis. Is marijuana is medicine. It is one of the oldest medicines known to man. It goes back, millennia. 2,000 years ago, there's an argument that it was one of the gifts that the three wise men gave to Jesus. There's people who talk about it being part of the rituals of Abraham and even before him, Melchizedek, when Noah came off of the ark. It's been around a while, folks. As far as quality goes, continues to be an issue. Now, this is one of those things you brought up, Dolores. Veterans need care, and federal government is blocking it. One of the reasons why is because we all know that medical marijuana helps resolve a number of different issues, everything from traumatic brain injury, diseases and illnesses associated with the burn pits that continue to be a big problem. Medical cards, and post-traumatic stress, injuries. Okay. Now, one of the things that the marijuana does, whether you're using or sativas, it helps relax the way that information flows through the mind. So it lowers or increases the threshold for certain triggers to be achieved. So that if you have high flight or fight reactions, if you're prone to fight or flight reactions under, various levels of stress, what medical marijuana does is it reduces that inclination so that you can stop back and calmly address the issues associated with your post-traumatic stress injuries, so that you're no longer dealing with the problems that continue to build around your post-traumatic stress, around your traumatic brain injury, and lets you start the process of healing. Federal legislation or federal regulations continue to block that. The Schedule 1 on the Controlled Substances Act continues to prevent access. Move to Washington. Yeah, there's people who just crossed the border. Right now, state of Idaho happens to be one of the big issues because it's like one of 6 states that still hasn't legalized it in some form or another. And right now, we spend approximately $3 million a week driving across the border to buy marijuana-based products, buy THC, whether we're using it medicinally or recreationally. We are spending $3 million a week in out-of-state marijuana sales. And a lot of it is because people need it, whether it's for the post-traumatic stress injury, regardless. So the fact that we still, 3-4 years in legislation right now, President Joe Biden, one of his big campaigns was, we're going to deschedule marijuana. We're going to deschedule marijuana. We're going to deschedule marijuana. Nope. It's where we're still at, folks. We are still having marijuana on the schedule. And Biden still hasn't taken executive action. And he hasn't put the issue in front of the House or the Senate to make sure that the Democrats associated with the program are on board with legalization or decriminalization of marijuana. So out here in Idaho, the standard fix, repeal 21 U.S. Code 812, be done with the whole thing. Just done. That's all we need. Single page. This legislation is to repeal 21 U.S. Code 812. It's going to put a lot of cops out of work. It's going to put the CIA out of work. It's going to put significant FBI out of work. It will end the drug enforcement agencies at all levels: local police, county, state, national. Think of all those resources. And the government could tax drugs again. It'd be selling drugs just like everybody else who's broke. Amber, one of the things you bring up, okay, any and all resources, okay? Department of Veterans Affairs cannot prescribe marijuana for post-traumatic stress injuries or similar issues because it is a Schedule 1. Some of these other items that you list, ketamine, mushrooms, some of them are Schedule 2, so they're allowed to be used, but there's not a lot of research in those in therapy for a number of reasons. Not necessarily good ones either. Thank you for joining us today. Good start. Go start. Okay, tell me about it. It's one of those things. Post-traumatic stress injuries were one of those things that are popularized, okay, because it was used to highlight the injuries of combat and stress associated with it. The thing is post-traumatic stress injuries continue to be a huge issue across the full spectrum right now. Military sexual trauma, MST, has post-traumatic stress injury symptoms associated with it. Rape, survival, post-traumatic stress injuries. Childhood trauma, post-traumatic stress injuries. I remember when I was going through psych class talking about things related to other forms of stress, being rendered homeless, okay, being evicted, being fired from a job, all create degrees of hyper awareness, hyper alertness, and hypersensitivity to certain situations, which prevent you from performing optimally because of anxiety related to previous stressors. Everybody these days has post-traumatic stress injury, COVID, fear-based. Even recently, the thought of nuclear war with Russia has boomers just off the deep end. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you bring up here, Michelle, Israel has done an awful lot of research in cannabis. A lot of really good in-depth research associated with that, and we're glad to see it happening. Not necessarily appreciative of the fact that they were essentially using our money, U.S. money, to handle this research associated with cannabis in Israel. Still good results. And yeah, this is one of those things, Amberly. 400 plus pages is what's in the M.O.R.E Act. Okay, you add on the sister legislation that has to go with it, much of which is going to be contradictory. The Safe Banking Act, certain other marijuana rehabilitation. They got some other good ones that are associated with it. Each one of them has their own terms, own reasons, own things that are involved in it. But yeah, 400 plus pages. It's more regulations that will send more people to jail for selling without a tax stamp, for growing without registering your plants with the city, state, feds, trading, your marijuana with your next door neighbor, your home grow. All of these are things that could become problematic as the M.O.R.E Act gets passed. And this is all about the lobbyist organizations and creating regulatory capture so that big tobacco becomes big marijuana. And of course, all the investors that are associated with that. One of the rumors associated with the reason why marijuana is not legal in the state of Idaho yet is because of how many of our politicians are still invested in dispensaries, which are just across the border. Okay, that concentration purchase location, everybody has to go to the same 5 shops in Ontario, Oregon in order to buy something. As a result, all the profit goes through those 5 shops. The second it's legalized in the state of Idaho, those shops no longer have all of the sales or all of the profits. So again, it's about who's invested into what as to what actually gets passed. Brandy, absolutely. Childhood abuse trauma, medical trauma. Medical trauma is a big one. As much as we love to trust our doctors to do the right thing, our doctors do not always do the right thing. That's one of the things. I do not know whether or not the M.O.R.E Act actually allows for personal growth under any circumstances. It may not allow personal grow, and your nearest dispensary is 50 miles away because you live in a dry county. One of those things that can happen. So let's see. One of the other things that we got. I want to talk about. Ooh, yes. Let's talk about this. Okay, so today, Secretary of the Treasury Yellen, and let me go ahead and bring that up because we're no longer talking about the M.O.R.E Act. Our new thing is Secretary of the Treasury, and what's the guy's name at the Federal Reserve? Chairman of the Federal Reserve. And Chairman of the Federal Reserve. Okay. These people, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary Yellen, and the chairman of the board, I can't remember what his new name is. Okay, they were testifying in front of Congress today about what's coming down the pike, folks. What's coming down the pike. Okay, Now, 4 months ago, they were talking about COVID relief, how much money they had injected back into the community, the system, in order to alleviate pressures associated with, well, unemploying nearly 100 million people with their COVID antics. Well, now here we are 4 months later. It is April. This is after the war in Ukraine has essentially wrapped up. And right now we got the whole process of who's investigating whose war crimes. While the Secretary of Treasury and the Chairman of the Fed are sitting in front of Congress going, yeah, we may have made a mistake. Yeah. They may have made a huge mistake. Reason why is because with sanctions that they put on Russia. Okay. And what Russia has done with the Ukraine as far as interfering with the agricultural seasons, start stockpiling staple foods, other commodities that you can't live without now. Okay. Reason why is because the commodities globally, the commodities are all up for grabs. Okay, earlier this year, China made a run on the futures of several key commodities in the United States. In addition to that, the Russian invasion of Ukraine affected the breadbasket, and our sanctions on Russia affect our ability to actually acquire grain and other resources from Russia. So now Russia and Ukraine have been denied our normal access to imports of certain key products, key staples like wheat for flour, a number of other things that we've used to supplement our needs here in the United States. China owns the futures on several key commodities, which means it's already been bought and sold. Things, Michelle, you bring up growing zone shifting. Okay, we recently got a mud storm here in the state of Idaho. My friend likes to call it the new Sierra, the new Savannah, new Sahara. That's what she calls it, the new Sahara. The aridification or desertification of the Pacific Northwest. Okay, we've already looked in the state of Idaho at cutting back on irrigation reserves. Okay, so our growing season is going to be shorter. We're going to have less water on our major crops. Potatoes being a big one. Potatoes is a huge water intensive crop. Without consistent water the entire time, potatoes will not grow consistently to size, and they will not be the nice, pretty little potatoes that we see occupying our grocery shelves. Up 22 in vets. Yes, I have forward movement, and I actually need to work on that. DJ Elf has been working on trying to communicate with me, but again, I'm busy. And again, some of the things that you bring up on forward movement with regards to the up 22. Now, I've had my conversations with DJ Elf, and again, it's related to an awful lot of these things. One of the key things it's mentioned by out here in Idaho is the idea of food sovereignty. Okay. Mention here wheat, flour, cornmeal, sugar, dried beans, salt, vegetables. The ironic thing is we have access to all of these things in the state of Idaho. Okay. Most of the flyover states have access to these things within their community. The irony is our supply chain here in the United States goes into these communities, takes these things, ships them 1,000 to 2,000 miles away to someplace in either California or Texas to process it through one of three major corporations, and then turn around and stick it on trucks to send it back out. Okay, now what this means is that communities, agricultural communities, who are literally growing and creating this stuff, won't actually see the results because the futures have been bought on their crops. The crops have already been sold to someone who's going to send in trucks, pick it all up, and ship it to the central processing. And from there, it's going to go to key locations. Okay. This is one of the problems that we had with the development of monopolies across the United States and the oligarchies associated with our food production. We all know that there are three major corporations that process all of the food in the United States. Everything you eat, okay, not everything, 90% of the things you eat, unless you have your own garden, has been touched by one of three corporations and ran through one of their processing plants. This is one of those things out here in Idaho brings up some good points. Okay, your basics, the things that you need to bake, things you need to make. And every state with a rational government should be shifting their priorities to self-sustainability. Okay, this is the issue of food sovereignty that we talked about. Okay, whether you're Green Party food sovereignty, whether you're Libertarian Party food sovereignty, hell, even if you're full-blown communist tanky food sovereignty. Okay, the idea is you still need to shorten your supply chain line as much as possible. States need to become food independent. They need to be food sovereign. Okay, that means all of these contracts, your local farmers need to be able to break those with the commodity exchanges. You need to be able to go and not go through USDA certified. You need to be able to do farm to table within your state. You need to be able to go out to one of the local farmers out there who grows their own beef, does their own farming, and, right, can't even retain your own crop for seed next year. Okay? Remember how that happened? The Holodomor. Let's talk about the Ukraine and the way the state took possession of seed. Okay, the Holodomor is one of those lower things on the list. And it's one of the reasons why, as much as you want to complain about the Nazis in Ukraine, okay, the Ukrainians fought the Russians during World War II, so they must have been Nazis. Dude, I hate to tell you this, but when Hitler went into the Ukraine to enlist aid to fight on the Western Front, the Ukrainians took the aid and started a war with Russia. Okay, the Ukrainians are the reason Hitler lost. But it wasn't because the Ukrainians fought Hitler. It's because Ukrainians picked their own fight after Germany armed them. Okay. Food sovereignty, medicine, semiconductors, energy. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, you need to be able to convince your state legislatures, your state bodies, that they are capable of energy sovereignty, medicine sovereignty, food sovereignty. And part of that medicine sovereignty goes back to the M.O.R.E Act. And whether or not we even bother listening to the feds with regards to the Substance Control Act anymore. Monsanto's aggressive patent enforcement led to mass suicides of Indian farmers. Okay, this is India, not American Indian or indigenous. This was India. Okay, we need a mechanism to end seed patents after one generation of growing. Okay, so this goes back to the issue that Michelle brought up. Do we or do we not own our own seeds? Okay, as we look at the issues of food shortages, food sovereignty is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. This is one of those things that was brought up in the discussion between Secretary Yellen and the chairman of the Fed. Okay, we're looking at extreme inflation. We are looking at commodity futures that are going to deny us access to our own food in a lot of places. Okay, which is one of those things that's extremely ironic, because here we were able to forecast this out nearly 4 months ago. Okay, you're looking at out here in Montana. Okay, for those of you who don't know, this is Mike Long. Mike Long is a libertarian candidate for the Idaho State Legislature. Okay, so if you're in Idaho and you have an opportunity to take a look, Mike Long, okay, for uh, state legislature, and he's got the idea because he understands 4 months ago we should have known before Idaho legislators went into session on January 11th. Okay, we knew this food shortage was going to happen. We knew all the things. We knew who owned our food. We knew why they owned our food. Yet here we are. We were 21A. Okay, Mike Long out here in 21A. Okay. We knew there was going to be problems. Okay, not a single Idaho state legislator promoted the idea of food sovereignty, where we divorced ourselves from federal mandates on how we process and manage and sell our food within our own state, that would have allowed farm to table to be completely uncompromised. And now we do have an advantage in that, for the most part, nobody enforces those regs in the state of Idaho to begin with. So literally, you can go to the farmer's market or you can go directly to the farm. And in some cases, we even have some farmers that will deliver it directly to you. Okay, but if we had gone full court press on this to make sure that we had food sovereignty here in the state of Idaho, go start, yeah, $650 worth of supplies. And you only got 2 full fridges. It's got to hurt, man. That's got to hurt. So these are things that are coming, folks. Pay attention. Okay. For some communities, it may be too late already. For other communities, there's still an opportunity. Anytime between now and November, the Idaho governor can enact a new state of emergency and terminate our association with regulations associated with the state of Washington. But will he? After his last state of emergency and the continuing fight that's going on with that, the idea of an executive order giving liberty to the state of Idaho, granting Idaho food sovereignty through executive order of the state. It's going to be interesting times, folks. It's going to be interesting times. Now, the thing is that same scenario can play out in every state in America. Okay, restaurant supply stores, U.S. Chef and Boise, excellent price, bulk. Okay, bulk. U.S. Chef and Boise and Meridian are actually pretty good. Reason why is because they will sell to non-corporate businesses. Even though they say restaurant supply, you don't have to be a restaurant to go in and buy in bulk. And they've found alternative sources for the supply chain. So they're actually pretty good. And yeah. Okay. So now that we're done with the doom and gloom associated with the fact that the U.S. Treasury and the Fed screwed the pooch. And yes, they did. They did in a big way. Let's go ahead and talk about one of these next things. And this is, again, it's related, even though it's not exactly the same thing. Okay, I want to be able to wrap this up. Now, oligarchs. Okay, one of the things the United States Secretary of State and the President did when they went in and they just sort of did a sanction against a nation. If you're from that nation, you're sanctioned. If you're from that nation, we're going to deport you. If you're from that nation, we are going to seize your property and assets. And several NATO countries started doing that. They started seizing Russian assets, regardless of who owned them, without due process, without understanding whether or not they were involved in any of the decision-making process that led up to the war in Ukraine. Okay, and here's the latest development. Okay, Putin in turn said, no, we're not going to sanction the United States because when you sanction a nation, you hurt the people of that nation. What Putin did is he sanctioned individuals. Okay, he sanctioned. Okay, U.S. admitted to using no confidence intel to get ahead of Putin. Yeah, and they did, and we've been played. That said, again, we've talked about this before. The fog of war. Okay, we are still deeply involved in the fog of war. We know it is propaganda coming from Ukraine, propaganda coming from Russia, propaganda coming from the United States. Everybody wants their spin on it because everybody wants support of their people and their nation and the support of their enemies' people. Okay, as we've seen, an awful lot of Republicans have gone to support Russia on the side of Ukraine as opposed to the Democrats, which are supporting Ukraine's side of the propaganda. Okay, be careful if you celebrate the confiscation of Russian oligarch assets. As soon as they break that seal looking outward, they will start looking in. Guns on the walls, 180, folks, 180. Once pointed out, can quickly turn to point in. So as we start looking at that, now Putin went in and sanctioned select individuals, mainly key oligarchs in the United States. President Biden, Kamala Harris, the Clintons, members of the Department of Defense, and Secretary of State. Okay, sanctioned, targeted people. Okay, now of course, around this time, the U.S. and European Union have turned around and done sort of the same thing, but it's sort of lost because they were already sanctioning these people as part of the collective, except now they've gone so far as to name specific names. Okay, it's like, how do you sanction someone again? Yet that's what they're trying to do. So we're looking at U.S. and EU trying to save face with targeted sanctions as opposed to the national sanctions, which apparently have backfired. Okay, the Russian ruble is currently back up to where it was prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We are looking at Zelensky, who is trying to convince the United Nations to remove a veto member of the National Security of the United Nations Security Council. Right? How do you make a motion to remove someone who's capable of vetoing the motion to remove them? I think that's got to be one of the biggest problems associated with the United Nations. And it's one of those that the United States over the last 50 years has used pretty heavily. Okay. I got to get going, folks. Again, my apologies for being late and getting late to the show. But I do believe in family. So love you. Sorry it's only 30 minutes. Take care of yourself. Take care of your community. Find the ways to shorten those supply lines. Because a war, whether it's a war of economies, like what we've currently decided to do with the sanctions, or whether it's an actual hot shooting war, you are the ones who will be expected to make the sacrifices in the coming days as the oligarchs decide how to screw us next. Family, friends, community. As long as you got those three, you can make anything happen. It's time to start making things happen, folks. No change, no power, no justice, no peace. See you soon. Bye.